Hi everybody, this is Karen again, and I have a list of questions that I have written down from the Facebook book club page. So I'm going to go through and answer a few of those, and maybe it'll spark some more questions that you can add in the comments below and we can chat down there. So I always love talking about books, so this is a treat for me. So Barb asked, in terms of the Road to Paradise, is this a series? I hope so. And I love that enthusiasm, Barb. Thank you. Amy also asked, in which park is the next one set? And can we get a teaser? So these are related. Yes, this is part of a series called the Vintage National Parks novels. I always have trouble getting all of those words in. The Vintage National Parks novels. And I would actually say it's more of a collection of novels as opposed to an ongoing series, because each of the novels will feature a different national park and a different year and different characters. So the characters will not necessarily be carrying through from book to book, but it'll be like a tour of the national parks in different vintage time periods. So even though it's kind of hard to say goodbye to Ford and Margie, I think you're going to enjoy visiting the new characters and seeing each of them develop in their own unique location. And to me that sounds like a fun way to do it as well. So also there was another question that was related here. Courtney asked, and this obviously I just answered too, is will we see Margie and Ford in later books? Well, like I said, Courtney, this is going to be new characters each time, but you never know. I never know, because I'm what they call a seat of the pants writer. I tend to write. I don't do a lot of outlining and planning ahead of time. I do some, and then as I write, things happen that I don't always expect. So I could see where it might be possible that Margie and Ford could show up in a future novel, but I don't have plans on that at the moment. And part of the reason for that is that for them to show up in the next novel or the novel after that, I would have to take them out of Mount Rainier. And as you can see, they were so entrenched in that place, so much a part of that place, and I want to keep them there so that they are, in a sense, impacting the future of the park. And that may sound funny from a fictional perspective, but to me, to take them out of the park and put them someplace else means that they're not there protecting it. So I really want to keep them there. But I'm not saying they won't ever show up in another one. I just don't have plans on it right now. Okay, there were a couple of questions. Oh, Amy had asked which park is the next one set. So we have plans for 3 Vintage National Parks novels. And you've read the first one, The Road to Paradise, set at Mount Rainier in 1927. The second novel will be set at Yosemite National Park. I hope someone's going, yay, Yosemite! Yosemite National Park in 1929. And the third novel will be set at Yellowstone National Park in 1933. Just saying each of those names gives me a little thrill, like, yay, we're going to Yosemite, and yes, we're going to Yellowstone. So I'm not going to give you a teaser now because the second book is in edits and it may change from what I have it as right now. And the third book I am still framing out and doing the research on. And I did record another video, and I'm not sure if it'll make it to the page or not, but I did record another video where I gave a little bit of a teaser. And if it doesn't show up, if we end up not using it on the Facebook page, I'll do a Facebook Live and give you a teaser there. Okay? A little bit of a teaser. Sarah asked, how long have you been writing, and what genres have you done, and what's ahead for you? And then related to that, Karen asked, have you thought about writing about different time periods? From what I can tell, all your novels take place during the first part of the 20th century, and what do you like about that particular time in American history? Yeah, so that gives a pretty good overview of the novels I've written so far. The Road to Paradise is my 5th novel, and they have all been set in the early 20th century, as Karen said, another Karen. And I'm not entirely sure why I have gravitated toward this time period. I can say I enjoy writing it because there is so much change going on in the early 20th century. Even between, the earliest chronologically, historically speaking, novel that I wrote was Out of the Ruins, and it was set in 1906. And then I've gone from there to the last book in the Vintage National Parks novels will be set in 1933, I think, 33 or 34. And so that's covering about, well, that's covering the first 3 decades, essentially, of the 20th century. And things have changed so much between 1906 and the early 1930s in the way that men and women react to each other, the way they interact, I should say. The roles of women has just been the change in that from the sort of Elizabethan era up through the 1930s. The change for women has been dramatic, and that's been fascinating for me as an author to research that and to write that. I could potentially write other time periods. I'm not opposed to doing that. In fact, I'm fascinated with the colonial era. I'm fascinated with World War II. I've had story ideas set in the 1960s. There are lots of things that I toy with writing, but right now I'm pretty content in this era. So I don't know, if I do too many, I guess I could get pigeonholed only writing these, but I don't think so. I think eventually I'll branch out and do some other time periods, but I'm loving this right now. So I have no grand desire to rush off to another time period. How long have I been writing was part of Sarah's question. And what genres have I done? So how long have I been writing? I started writing very young. As a kid, I used to fill up notebooks with stories, horse stories when I was really little, and then murder mysteries I did for a while. Mostly just beginning stories, not, I didn't finish books. I wasn't writing full books, but I would start a story and start some characters, and then I'd start a different one. So I can say I've always been writing, but intentionally pursuing publication has been probably a little over 10 years since my daughter was in full-time school, since my youngest was in full-time school. I found it difficult to write when the kids were really tiny just because it was hard to focus for long periods of time in order to get chapters written. So I know people who can do it, but it wasn't me. And what genres? I've stayed pretty much with historical romance. When I first started writing, I thought I was going to be a children's writer, and it took me some time to figure out that wasn't my voice, that wasn't my gifting, that wasn't where God wanted me. And I started with picture books, and then I had some ideas for middle grade fiction, then I worked up to YA, and eventually by the time I got published I was writing for adults. And it just takes some time to settle in and find out what your voice is and what you're really good at. So that's a note for aspiring writers, is to take your time and make sure you're writing in your sweet spot. Did I answer all of those questions? I think so. And then Millie asked, what made you decide to write a book about the national park system? And that, I could say, was both easy and difficult. It was easy for me to think about writing a book set in the National Park Service because that's a passion of mine. I worked for Mount Rainier National Park, and I worked at Silver Falls State Park in Oregon, and I'm fascinated with parks and with nature and with wilderness, and I hope that passion came through in The Road to Paradise. So for me it was easy to come up with ideas set in the parks. And I really liked the idea of a young woman. When I first thought of The Road to Paradise, I wanted her to become a ranger. And looking into the history, it wasn't practical at Mount Rainier in the year that I had set it. So I had to make some changes. But yeah, I just was excited about setting something in the national parks. I was concerned when it came to pitching that series because so much of Christian historical fiction, historical romance, has been set in like 1800s prairie romance and Oregon Trail stories, and I love those. I really do enjoy reading them, and I kind of thought that's what readers wanted. And so to set something in the early 20th century in the national parks felt a little out there, like I was taking a risk, like nobody's really going to want this. But my agent liked the idea when I mentioned it, and then when we spoke with my editor at WaterBrook&Multnomah, when they decided to contract the series, Shannon Marchese is my editor, and she was really excited about it. She's a big fan of the national parks, and it turned out so well, because what I wasn't thinking about when I thought, oh, this is out there, is that this is also an untapped market. All the people that are passionate about national parks and wilderness have not really had that expressed in fiction. There have been some novels. I don't mean to say there haven't been novels set in the national parks, because there have been some really good ones, but it just hadn't been done much. So I think it's working out well for us, and I'm excited to continue and feature some more novels set in the national parks. And then there was one other that, have I covered everybody's, how long have I been writing? Elizabeth asked, would you consider writing a prequel to The Road to Paradise? I would enjoy reading about the story of Ford's father. And that's really interesting, Elizabeth. I always have characters in each novel that I think I'd like to spend more time with. And okay, when I wrote The Road to Paradise, it wasn't actually Ford's father that caught my interest in a continuing story. And I think that's partially because he wasn't actually in the story. It was always in memories of him. And come to think of it, he would be an interesting story to tell. But the characters that drew me, that I remember thinking, oh, I'd like to go back and tell their story, was Superintendent Brown and Mrs. Brown, who was actually Ida Brown, but I don't think we ever said her first name in the story. Because at one point, Mrs. Brown makes a comment to Margie, and she says something like, you know, go along, you kids, you guys go have fun, go do your job. That she and Mr. Brown had had their time walking hand in hand through the wildflowers at Paradise. And as I wrote that line, I thought, wow, I wonder what their romance was. I wonder what it was like for them in the early years of Mount Rainier to be working at this park, and to take it back another 20 years or so and see what the park was like in the turn of the century. I believe Rainier was established in, I want to say 1899. I have that written down, but I always forget exactly what year. I think it was 1899. And so they would have been right there at the beginning. So I think it would be fascinating to write about them. I don't have a plan to do that at the moment, but maybe. There's also a story that I would be tempted to tell you now, but this video is already at 12.5 minutes, and I don't want to continue it much longer. But the inspiration behind the story of Ford's father's accident. There was a real avalanche that took a number of lives, and I know not everyone wants to hear about an avalanche and a grisly death and all that, but I would love to tell you a little more about why I chose that and what the basis was for that memory for Ford and for the passing of his father, because it's an interesting story. But I don't want to do it here, so I'll promise you I will do it on a Facebook Live over on my author page. So stay tuned for that, and make sure you're over on my author page at, I think it's Karen Barnett Author on Facebook, and then you can tune in for that video, and I'll tell you the inspiration behind that accident. For those of you that like knowing the research behind the stories and where some of these ideas come from. So I won't make this video any longer. Anyway, I really appreciate all of these questions. Let's see, Elizabeth, Millie, Barb, Amy, Sarah, Karen, and Courtney. Thank you for having the courage to ask some questions. For those of you that didn't get your questions asked, go ahead and put them in the comments below, and I will try and get to them. And I love talking about books, and I love talking about the stories, so I'd be more than willing to answer any questions that you have. You can also find me over on my website at KarenBarnettBooks.com. Remember to put the books in there, KarenBarnettBooks.com. And I hope you'll sign up for my newsletter there, because that's how you'll find out about the upcoming novels. When the Yosemite book and when the Yellowstone book are ready to release, that information goes out to my newsletter subscribers first. So you can sign up for you can subscribe to my newsletter on my website at KarenBarnettBooks.com. Hope you got that. Anyway, I've really enjoyed talking with everyone here on the Facebook page and enjoyed the book club, and I hope you have enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for reading The Road to Paradise, and I hope you will tune in for the next two as well. Bye!